Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If this information interests you, please press the like and subscribe button and press the bell for notifications. Well, good day to you. It is the 22nd of September. And if you are into R&B music from the 70s, you would know the group Earth, Wind & Fire. And if you know the group Earth, Wind & Fire, then you would remember the 21st of September. It's my favorite Earth, Wind & Fire song. And I remember the 21st of September really well because I tried to record this video yesterday and it just got so long I had to stop. And I will have to make two videos. I'm going to start with this one, and then tomorrow I'll do another video answering the other two questions that I have. So typically what I'll do, if you ask a question about Maitreya, the Masters of Wisdom, they post it as a comment, and then the next video I'll try my best to answer it. In this case, because I have so many wonderful questions, I'm going to have to postpone two questions to the next video. All right. Let's get on into it. Now, the first one is a comment about the last video that I made about Isiah, who was a young painter who painted a painting of Jesus. And it's quite a famous painting that has been featured in on some talk shows in the morning, in the afternoon even, news articles, of course, in some movies and so forth. What we talked about in it was, and the reason why I brought her up was talking about the fact that Benjamin Creme had commented about her painting and who was in the painting. She apparently painted the Master Jesus, who was Jesus 2,000 years ago, came and visited this young girl, and sat quite still, I guess, for several days so she could paint a painting of Jesus. And it was the Master Jesus who allowed her to paint himself, so that kind of thing. So it's quite an extraordinary story, knowing what we know about this information and so forth. Now, I had touched a little bit about her background life. I assumed she was quite religious based on the themes of her paintings. I think there's more to Isiah than I gave her credit. So there was a person who commented, and if you're interested, or if you heard that video the other day and you're interested in knowing a little bit more about who the painter is, I definitely recommend checking out the comment that was posted in the last video, because I thought it was a wonderful comment about who and what she is, about what she believes, and even some of the resistances that she had to and still has to contend with based on who she is. So anyway, hopefully that helps. All right. So, then also wanted to thank the person for actually posting it. So they definitely added to what I was talking about. All right. Now, the first question is, and has been asked several times by the same person, which means one of two things. Either I'm not answering the question up to this person's standards and they're just very polite and asking the question again, or they're not actually taking the time to actually listen to my response. I don't know. But I don't mind answering this question again, and because I can always talk about different points of different things. So anyway, hopefully this helps. All right. So what does Maitreya and the Ascended Masters say about NATO, war machines, Contra opponents, the World War III? In terms of NATO, I don't know what he's said at all about NATO. Benjamin Creme's master never really talked about NATO either, so I don't know. In terms of the war machines, I would say probably the biggest war machine is the Pentagon, right? The interesting thing about this, knowing this information, the esoteric view of what's going on in the Pentagon is quite interesting, because it relates directly to the Antichrist. Now, according to the ageless wisdom teachings of John and the book of Revelation, the Antichrist that's written all throughout that book is not intended to be interpreted as an individual, but people, because of the way it's written, assume he's talking about an individual that will come out before the Christ, fool the nations, and so forth. I mean, you know as much about the Antichrist from what the churches have put out for centuries as much as I do, right? Now, given in this environment that we're in today with the way the internet is and how anybody can believe me, anybody, I mean, I'm a perfect example of it, can actually record a video about whatever they want to talk about. There are all these different interpretations and views on who could be the Antichrist or who they think is the Antichrist. Typically, it's a celebrity that's known or is going through their 15 minutes of fame at this time, or maybe somebody's been around for a while. Somebody maybe has a little controversial view. They could be the Antichrist. In the case of Maitreya, because he has said many times that he knows that we have it within us to create peace, then he therefore is fooling everybody and he is the Antichrist. And there's some other reasons why people think he's the Antichrist, but that's the main one. But if you really look at it and break it down, before I get into how this relates to the Pentagon, the Antichrist that people are looking for, that people assume is, and I've heard, the craziest one I heard was the wrestler, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, is the Antichrist. But anyway, he seems like a pretty genuine, nice guy. But anyway, what do I know? It's always somebody that has a different view on something that they have. So if you're a strong right-wing, leaning Republican, and you're looking for the Antichrist, well, it will be a Democrat. So it was Obama, right? If you're maybe a little left-winging, a little bit, you'd think Trump was the Antichrist or whatever. But the Antichrist is an energy. It's never intended to be written in as an individual. It was initially sent out through Nero during the time that John was writing the book of Revelation. The first beast in the Bible was none other than Nero. It resurfaced again 2,000 years later or so, or just under 2,000 years, I guess, during World War II, through the Axis powers. And the order in which I'm listing it is the order of the potency of that point of that triangle that allowed that energy to come through. So the strongest and most potent point of that triangle was, of course, the Nazis in Germany through Hitler. And Hitler was kind of the poster child for the Nazis. So, one could make the argument that he was the Antichrist, but it really was this group of people. The second were the militarists in Japan around the emperor. So it wasn't the emperor himself, it was the militarists that were causing they wanted to take over that part of the world for themselves and that kind of stuff. And then a lesser, but still very potent, were the fascists in Italy. So those 3 points created a triangle which allowed that energy of the Antichrist to be sent out into the world. It has its purpose. We've talked about it in several videos. I don't want to get into it too much, or this video will get too long. But there's a purpose for that Antichrist energy coming out at the end of an age and the beginning of another age. But it really has to do with just changing and the way that we relate to one another and think and those kind of things. But it destroys the old ways of thinking. Now, when the Axis powers were defeated, that energy was not, how do I say it? Was not sealed to its own domain. It wasn't defeated. So it resurfaced quite quickly under 3 different points on the planet. Still very powerful, but not quite as powerful as what happened during World War II. And I'm going to list these in the potency of their effectiveness for that nefarious energy too. The first one is in the Zionist movement in Israel. The second one is in the Pentagon, which is why I'm bringing this up. And then the third one is around where Yugoslavia used to be, in the Slavic states in Eastern Europe, now Bosnia, Serbia, that kind of thing. So we've seen the effects of genocide over the decades and so forth with Milosevic and some of the other evil leaders that were working in that area. You also see what the Zionists are doing to the Palestinians in Israel and throughout the Middle East. And of course, you see the nefarious ways that the Pentagon has been working over the decades. Now, according to the Masters, the Pentagon is actually what's running this country. It's not the president. So when we elect a president, well, it doesn't matter whether they're Democrat or Republican, there's an influential effect from the Pentagon. And every president since the inception of the military-industrial complex of the Pentagon has been influenced somewhat or quite a bit, or not very, a little bit, by that nefarious force. Now, even President Eisenhower, who was a general during World War II, in his last public address to the people of the United States in the Oval Office, he expressed his deep concern for putting all those war hawks into one building, away from the eyes and ears of Congress and of the president. He saw it as very dangerous. Warned his predecessors to be very careful of what was going on there. He obviously knew, because that was, he was a general during that time, so he knew who he was dealing with and the type of people that these people are. So the war machine, the masters have talked at a great length. It's the Pentagon is really, the foreign policy of the United States coming out of the Pentagon. I'm sure even the domestic policies coming out of the Pentagon. And it really doesn't matter whether there's a Democrat in office or a Republican in office. They are the ones that are making and calling all the shots. So now in terms of a World War III, we've talked about this many times. Until humanity sees the need and actually implements the principle of sharing, there will always be a possibility of a third world war. Always. I think it will take Maitreya being known for who he is, based on what we've been reading with Benjamin Creme's Masters article, in order for us to really implement that principle in the fullest effect. But once we do, that will mean pretty much the end of the possibility of us ever having a third world war. And the longer we delay now, on the other side is, the longer we delay the principle of sharing, the likelihood of a third world war keeps going up and up and up. So it's very important that we look at the sense of urgency in implementing the principle of sharing, and, which I'm going to talk about in a second, SOP, saving our planet. So we have to look at it like that. Now, the thing about World War III also is Maitreya knows better than anyone, based on the fact that he's the master of all the masters, but he knows the hearts of all the people on the entire planet. He knows deep within the hearts of people who, even on the surface, you would not imagine that they would even have this in their nature somewhere, is longing for, desiring unity, peace, oneness, and justice. We all want it. But whether we're consciously thinking that that's what we really want is a whole other thing. So the mind, the person might be not exhibiting any of those qualities, or they might be manifesting the exact opposite of what's in their heart. But Maitreya knows what's in the hearts of all of us. And he also, now that he's speaking on TV, even though he's speaking on TV in a very with a simplified message, and nobody's really picking up on the fact that he could be Maitreya, or the one awaited by all the religions, which doesn't really matter, Make no mistake about it, he is the Lord of love, speaking heart to heart with the listener who's watching him on TV. And according to the masters, even some of the most hardened cynics are starting to question what he's saying, and thinking about it and inquiring about it. There might be something to this. Some people probably are outright rejecting it for now. They might change their position on it in the future, but for right now, but it is affecting them, where they're thinking about it. Like, maybe we should look at, peace as the most important thing that we should look at. Now, I don't know to what extent Maitreya is talking about it on TV in terms of the steps, the very simple steps. Without sharing, there could be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. Of course, without peace, there could be no future, that he's actually talking about. So, anyway, hopefully that helps. But yes, I would say not likely with that. But, all right, now, I kind of jumped into it, and it kind of leads me to what we were just talking about in terms of changing our ways. But this image on this video in the background, Save Our Planet, SOP, this is coming from one of Benjamin Creme's Masters articles. And according to the Masters, they want and are hoping that humanity uses the phrase SOP as a rallying call for action to help save our planet. Now, if you've listened to my videos before, I thank you very much for coming back, and hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully it's triggered something with you to act to help save the planet. But if you've made it through all my interminable dross and made it to the end of the videos, you would notice that every video that you listen to, at the very end, there's a recording of me saying, and remember to take action, and SOP, save our planet. Now, these are just words. SOP, save our planet, is just words. And words have meaning, but they don't mean anything if nothing happens from it. But if action comes from those words, then those words have power, right? It's time for each one of us to take a very serious account of what we personally can do to help SOP, save our planet. Very, very important. You know, I'm not putting these videos up for entertainment purposes. I'm putting them up to hopefully, even if it's just one person, to see the need to help SOP save our planet. I mean, that's the reason why we're talking about this. So think about what you can do. You can do something, you can add something, you can help in a way that only you can help. And I'm not just saying that just to say it. It's the truth of the matter. You add something, whoever you are, whoever's listening to this video, whenever you're listening to this video, you add something that nobody else on the planet can add and help. So think about it. Anyway, hopefully this helps. All right. Now, the next question comes from, actually, it doesn't really matter who it comes from, but they were talking, there was a couple comments coming up, and the person who had originally mentioned this person's name, I had talked about Tatiana Mikashina, I think is how you pronounce it, Mikashina. A few videos back, maybe a few months ago, we talked about it. But the question was, did Benjamin Creme ever talk about Tatiana Mikushina, who is claiming to have messages from Maitreya? To answer that question the way it's written, I don't know. I don't think so. Now, what he, at least publicly, okay, because Benjamin Creme always allowed people to think for themselves. He always presented this information for us to consider for ourselves and not to come out as some kind of authority on anything. So he probably more than likely in the public eye didn't say anything about what she was saying, you know, who she was it authentic or not. Now, I consider it this. I'm trying to do the same thing where I don't talk about somebody else and what and any claims that they make about having contact with the masters or whatever, because it is up for every one of us to decide for ourselves what is true and what isn't. So, and I'm not an authority. I can assure you of that. So, and if you knew me personally, you would say, you don't know anything, right? But I will give you a hint, okay? And we're just going to leave it like this. And this isn't directed toward the person asking the question. This is just directing, you know, people who ask questions, similar questions about this. I'm not saying that this person is getting messages from Maitreya, and I'm not outright saying that they aren't. I'm just throwing something out on the table for you to consider. We're just discussing something, okay? So I'm not the authority, and you're listening to me in that way. We're all equals here. We're all just talking. Unfortunately, I have the mic, and unless you're willing to drive to Atlanta, you won't get the mic. Now, you can make a comment, you know, and that's when I like to talk about the comments, so that's kind of my way of discussing it. But anyway, did Benjamin Creme ever talk about Tatiana Mikushina? And no, like I said, no, I don't know. But my view of it is this. If you looked at a person who is able to receive direct messages from the masters in that way telepathically, it's very rare. Even if they were evolved enough to be able to receive messages, it's rare that they would, because most people who are evolved enough in order to receive messages from these masters in that way, are not interested in the masters at all, don't know anything about them, probably don't even believe it. You know, if they knew about it, they wouldn't even believe it. They are only interested in the work that they're doing, whether it's in the political, economic, social field, even in arts, you know, that kind of thing, music, even education. And that's the only thing they're concerned about. And the masters work through them in different ways. They stimulate them, they inspire them, they might send them a little thought somewhere in it, but from them it's coming from their own mind. It's not coming from an outside source, you know. But it's probably coming from one or other of these masters. For the majority of us, we're not evolved enough to receive messages directly from the masters telepathically in that way, because you have to be able to sustain a level of mental clarity and focus and attention that most of us aren't there yet. Not saying that we'll never get there, but right now we're not, okay? Most of us are very centered in the emotional area. That's why if we're frightened or you have fear about something, where do you feel it first and easiest? You feel it in the pit of your stomach, of course, right? That's where you feel it. If you're anxious or if you're stressed, that's where you're feeling the tension is in your stomach, because that's the seat of where the emotions are coming from. Now, out of those people who are evolved enough to receive messages, it's even rarer for them to receive those messages, and then it's even rarer for them to even have it as their work to make it known to the general public. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying this person is or isn't, but if you look at, there was 4 people that I know of throughout the last 100 or so years that were evolved enough to receive a message from the Masters or Maitreya, were able to, were trained to do it even too. So most people who claim to have messages coming from these Masters weren't trained by anything or anybody. They just felt like it all of a sudden naturally came to them. Even Benjamin Creme, it said it took him years and years and years working all throughout the day and into the evening, into the night, working upwards of 20 hours a day in order to be able to receive messages without any distortion coming from his master. His master worked with him, in that way, trained him in that way, was very rigorous in his training with him that way to be able to do it. And so I don't think anybody that claims to have messages from Maitreya or these masters can make that assertion that they were trained to do it, that the master that they're receiving the messages from worked with them moment to moment for hours and on end for over a decade to be able to do that. So, but out of the last 100 or so years, I would say there's maybe 4 who were, like I said, evolved enough to receive messages, did receive messages, and then it was also their job to make it known to the general public. Starting with Helena Blavatsky, and then Helena Roerich, Alice Bailey, of course, because she wrote volumes from the information she received from the Master DK, and then, of course, Benjamin Creme. And then the 5th one, who his teaching really is very similar to what I think the teachings of Maitreya is Krishnamurti, because Krishnamurti was actually trained early on to be the vehicle for the world teacher for this time. Okay, and then it was planned that Maitreya and the Masters would come back in the way that they're coming back now 1,000 years from now. So he was going to kind of set the stage for us to go into the New Age and then of Aquarius, and then Maitreya and the Masters will come back in about year 3000-ish or so. That plan was scrapped because of the advent of the atomic bomb. That Maitreya said, no, he can't do it. I have to come myself. So I'm sure Krishnamurti knew who Maitreya was, because Maitreya was training him in the same way that Benjamin Creme was being trained by his master, to be able to receive those messages the way that he did, to be overshadowed by Maitreya the way he is. But he didn't talk about Maitreya, but you can tell that those are teachings coming from the higher source. I mean, it's very clear when you listen to Krishnamurti. Like I said, he didn't talk about it. It wasn't part of his job duties to bring about information about the Masters. He didn't subscribe to any ideology even. So, but yet at the same time, those are the teachings of. They're very similar to what you'll probably hear from Maitreya when he starts talking about the self and those kind of things. So now there are other people who are receiving messages from the Masters, I'm sure, but it's not their job to let people know that they're receiving messages. And they can be found in a lot of different fields: the arts, social fields, political fields, of course, economic, religious fields. And they would never tell you that they're receiving messages from these Masters. You would just say, wow, that's pretty deep, what they said. But, I know of an artist. Now, I'm an artist myself, and I'm not talking about myself, so let's be very clear about that. But I know of an artist who is evolved enough to receive messages from Maitreya, is an amazing artist, but yet that's not her job. So whether she's doing it or not or whatever doesn't really matter. But it's just, same thing with, if you were to use another example, Willy Brandt, who was the former Chancellor of Germany. was evolved enough to be able to be overshadowed by Maitreya. Whether he was or wasn't, I don't know. But it wasn't his job to make known the presence of the masters the way that somebody like Benjamin Creme or Alice Bailey or Helena Blavatsky, that was their job. So just throwing out my 2 cents and my opinion on it. You take it for what it is, and you can think whatever you want to think about, what I'm saying about Tatiana Mikushina. But anyway, again, who's to say? I don't know. I mean, it's ultimately I don't know, but it's just, that's my opinion on when somebody makes claims about, having direct messages from Maitreya or the masters. So hopefully that helps. All right. Lastly, somebody asked a really interesting question, and it said, what do you think about Isaiah 11:1 in the Bible? Does it speak of Maitreya? And I'll read the verse and see what you think. It says, a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, from the roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of power, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears. But with righteousness he will judge the needy, with justice he will give decision for the poor or the earth, of the earth, He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. So, I apologize I didn't write down the person's name who wrote this question. I think this is a wonderful question that you brought up, and it's a wonderful verse. First, let me say this, okay, because there's several different things I want to say, because you asked for my feedback. The first thing I'm going to say is, you may be right. I don't know, okay, for sure. Was he talking about Maitreya or not? Now, the other way, when I read this, the other thing that came to my mind is, maybe he was talking about the future role of the Messiah as Jesus. So, because Isaiah came before Jesus. So maybe he was talking about Jesus's role, which could very much be who and what he was talking about. The other thing is, and with any verse in the Bible, it's always better to kind of not hold on to your interpretation of, or even somebody else's interpretation, which is even worse, right, of what they think a biblical verse should be about, right? And to be more like a scientist or an investigator when coming to reading the Bible. I've always kind of looked at it like that, and not just, especially reading it at first glance and go, I got it. It's good. I don't need to know any more about it. This is it. That's where the danger comes in. So always want to have a different view, different things. So was he talking about Maitreya? You could be right. Was he talking about Jesus? Maybe. I don't know. The other thing is, and I do think that this could hold a lot of value if you look at it from this perspective too, is he could have been talking also, or talking about, the process of when somebody's heart opens up and they start to see the suffering in the world. How did he put it? But with righteousness he will judge the needy, with justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. The other thing is, they will stand out against injustice. He will slay the wicked with his, with the breath of his lips, he'll slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. He won't be able to be corrupted. So when you are free from dogma, and you're free from illusion, and you still see the injustice, you speak out against it. But you speak out against it through love. You don't speak out against it crying for violence and revolution. You're speaking out for a spiritual revolution, if you know what I mean. So is that what he was talking about? Maybe. That's another interpretation. And I think that you can look at a lot of these things in those ways. But was it just a prophetic statement? Like I said, you could be right. I mean, I can't say whether you're right or wrong. I'm not a scholar in the Bible. I do want to say this. When I read this, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I wasn't familiar with this verse, so it was really, when I read this, I thought a lot about it. So the days that, from when you wrote it to now, I've really thought about this quite a bit. Not only how to answer it, but also, trying to apply it to my life. And so it reminded me of an experience that I had with Maitreya, where when I looked at the hand of Maitreya, and I've talked about the hand of Maitreya being a useful tool for creating a mind-to-mind contact with Maitreya, and then you can ask him for help, and if it's within your karmic, limit, if it's within your karma to do, he will help you in any way he can. And I've seen some direct help from him when I've done it. But in this situation, it was one evening. I was not in a good space emotionally for whatever reason, and I started thinking about the lack of work that I was doing to help SOP, and I started feeling guilty about it based on what I knew. And it started to really emotionally affect me at this evening. And this was 12 years ago, so this has been a while. And I looked at the hand of Maitreya, and I cried out to him, I'm not worthy enough to call myself your disciple. What am I doing? I'm not doing anything. This is awful. I'm hypocritical. I'm, all this stuff. I was very judgmental and critical of what I've been doing and not doing for myself. And therefore assumed that he must be critical of what I've been doing or not doing, right? Now, I don't know how many days later, but it wasn't long after this, maybe a week. I was at a tiny little peace rally in Marietta, Georgia. Who comes to the peace rally but Maitreya? He was a young black man. He started saying some things to the lady who ran the peace rally, and it perked my ears immediately, and I recognized him immediately from his eyes, and he winked at me even. Said some things that definitely, I was like, yeah, that's Maitreya. Right now, he didn't say much to this lady, but anyway, as I was walking to my car, who was sitting on a table outside this pub by himself, but Maitreya. And I'm walking there, and I'll get to the point where I think it kind of relates to this, is he starts talking about a lot of things, but one of the things he said, he goes, you're going to see me on TV real soon, and we're going to change the world together. In fact, it was only about a year and a half or so from when he made that statement to when his first interview was. So not long after that was when it happened. And then he was talking about that and how there's going to be these changes in the world and all that kind of stuff. And right in the middle of a sentence, he very abruptly stopped himself, looked me right in the eye and goes, I never judge anyone on whether they're good or bad. I only notice the good things that they do. And then he went talking about something else. And then he asked me for a quarter of all things. He was like, can I have a quarter? And Maitreya will do that from time to time. He's trying to teach you the art of giving. And he'll ask for a pittance of an amount or a specific amount. Can I have 87 cents? And that's all you had in your pocket or something like that. So, but the thing of it is, and this is why I'm bringing this up, is my first interpretation of what he said about I never judge anyone on whether they're good or bad. I only notice the good things that they do. I took it personally about myself based on what I asked. And that could have been why he was bringing it up, okay? That he doesn't judge who I am for being good or bad. He's just seen the good things that I've done. And I've done some good things. You've done some good things. We've all done good things in our life. Maybe not that many. I don't know. I don't know you. You don't know me. But, and that's what he notices. He notices every time you love somebody. He even says, every time you love another person, it registers in his heart as love. And he sends his love to help amplify that within your heart. That's kind of his relationship with all, a very close relationship with every person on this planet. We don't realize how close he is to our thoughts and our feelings and our desires for unity and oneness, that we have no idea, how close he is in that regard. But anyway, then I started thinking more of it universally. The universal view of the Christ has always been one of, God's going to come back, or Jesus is going to come back as God and judge the wicked and reward the faithful. Was he saying that the Christ doesn't come back to judge? He only notices the good things that we all do? That's another interpretation that I had. I had that for years. And I figured, maybe that's what he was talking about. Maybe not so much with me. And then, and this brings me up to your point about Isaiah 11:1. So thank you for indulging me talking about this. But, he could have also been giving a very simple teaching about how to start loving unconditionally. You can't go from being critical and judgmental as a general rule and the way you see and assess people in your life to loving unconditionally the next day. It's Can't happen, really. So now, maybe a way to get from point A to point B or Z or whatever to being critical, hypercritical to loving unconditionally is to start noticing the good things that people are doing and not judging them on whether they're good or bad. And I started doing it. I started applying it to my life, and I found tremendous value in doing that. And that's why I'm saying this about this, is maybe, possibly, Isaiah was talking about how to start loving unconditionally as a possibility. He could have been talking about both. Who knows? You can interpret it a lot of different ways, but to not judge by what you see with your eyes and decide what you hear with your ear, but with the righteousness he will, judge the needy. With the justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth, And also not to stand idly by when you see wickedness and injustice, but to use your words, to use your voice to speak out against injustice. Have you slay the wicked with the breaths of your lips. Maybe that's what he was talking about. I don't know. But it's a wonderful verse, and it really got me thinking, and I'm trying to apply it to not only this information, but I'm also trying to apply it to my life. Now, I've already gone to 35 minutes, which is usually about 5 to 10 minutes longer than I normally do. I am going to end the video now. I still have some questions to answer from the comments. I will do a part 2 tomorrow or the next day, I promise. But thank you so much for those who have asked questions, and I look forward to more questions in the future. Thank you. Have a great day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.